All right. All right, closing out the agenda item on parking in Windsor Crest. Moving on to the next agenda item, if possible, and thank you for coming to the meeting and expressing your comments. Thank you. And possible warning system for Wild Horse Creek.
Marshall board members, we're backtracking to the for information items. This is an important item in my opinion, and wanted to present it to you to bring you up to date with some discussions and meetings that have been held over, I guess, since last fall, relative to Wild Horse Creek. And I think most people know we have a very large footprint in Wildwood, and we have 9 watersheds as a result of that large geographic footprint. And the downside of that is we have some flooding issues, and it would be, I guess, in my opinion, probably the worst of which is Wild Horse Creek. Wild Horse Creek runs from basically beyond Route T all the way to the Missouri River in Chesterfield Valley. It's not our largest watershed, but we do have a section of Wild Horse Creek Road, if you're familiar with it and if you drive it, between Centaur Road and Austin Fort, that more or less parallels the creek. And for a good mile of it, you can see the creek over your shoulder as you're driving. So the road is essentially built off the top of creek bank. And in fact, as I mentioned in my memo, technically the roadway is in the floodway of the creek. And the floodway is the main hydraulic water carrying portion of the creek. So when it floods, we have flooding on Wild Horse Creek Road. So it doesn't take an extreme weather event to flood Wild Horse Creek Road, but with the weather we've been receiving in Wildwood since I've been here in the last 10 years, it does seem that we are getting more frequent extreme events. And the flooding of Wild Horse Creek Road is becoming more frequent in itself. We had an issue, Chief Hafer, I don't know if you recall the date of the event or not, but we had a flood. I want to say it was in early November of last fall. We did have a flood rescue that was accomplished by Monarch on Wild Horse Creek Road, which likely was one of the reasons we have these meetings, because Chief Les Cruz is very passionate about this subject. And so a lot of this discussion evolved from former Councilmember Edens, and I'm pretty sure Chief Cruz was certainly pushing for that as well, knowing him as I have in my past. So I wanted to bring this to your attention because it's been on my mind a lot. That rescue that was done by Monarch certainly reinforced the concern in my mind that we have a roadway that floods and is likely to be more flooded in the future, in my opinion. And I'd like to explore options, and I think there's no doubt Les Cruz would say the same, to implement some sort of a flood warning system. And that's what we talked about at these meetings, was what are the options? And frankly, the more recent floods in Texas have even reinforced that further. So of the 2 meetings that we held with Monarch Fire, city staff, former Councilmember Edens was in attendance. We had representatives of the USGS, the U.S. Geological Survey there as well, and they've actually been getting more proactive, helping communities with this issue. And some of you may be aware, after the 2017 Merrimack flood, we worked with the USGS and some of the other communities, Eureka, Pacific, and others, to develop a flood inundation map of the Merrimack River. And it shows you, depending on the forecasted flood, what areas are going to be flooded. And it was very helpful for flood response. So the same idea could be applied in this instance with the USGS. And they provided, and I gave you a copy of it in my memo, a very detailed proposal to us to complete some flood warning services. However, based on the timeline that they provided, it doesn't look very realistic. They said in the memo it would be a 4-year effort which seems a little bit long in my mind. And it would cost the city upwards of possibly close to $200,000. Not that that is an insurmountable cost, in my opinion. And certainly if Monarch Fire was going to participate, it would help. But I think the duration, the 4-year duration, is probably the biggest concern I would have. At any rate, at the same time, we've been checking with some of the local vendors, or not local vendors, but vendors that we could find that are out there. And there are companies that do this sort of thing to a lesser degree than the USGS would do. But nonetheless, they can install flood warning systems for us for probably half the cost I would envision that the federal government was recommending. Again, it's not nearly as comprehensive a system because the US government, USGS, was recommending a system that actually forecasts the flood in advance and said, okay, you have 2 hours notice potentially of a flash flood on Wild Horse Creek, and it's going to be so deep in this area. So it would give you very, very pertinent, relevant information, and it would give you advance notice of the flood, but it is a Cadillac solution, I guess, is the bottom line. Potentially, we could have something in order much more quickly if we were able to go with a private vendor. And at a minimum, the type of system that they could provide would be linked to flood or water level sensors that are installed in the creek that trigger devices. So signs that would flash lights or flash a road closed, flooded, road ahead, could trigger gates to come down over the roadway, that kind of thing. It would be a system that is required to communicate wirelessly. There is some capital costs and maintenance of these devices if we went that direction, but it's certainly within the realm. So I'm primarily providing this to you tonight to bring you up to speed and get any feedback or comment that you might have. We are getting ready to go into the budgeting season. I think Mr. Lee's with us still, potentially. And I think he's heard me say I wouldn't mind it if we could find some money budgeted potentially for this effort next year. The capital improvements budget is extremely tight and there's a lot of conflicting priorities there, but I like to think this one might rise to the occasion. So I don't have a lot of detailed information for you right now. Glad to bring this back to you with more detailed information in the future. If you have any comments about this, I'll do my best to address any questions at this time.
Sure.
Yeah, I actually sat through that meeting and Mr. Brown helped me realize it was it 180 people living to the side of the flooded water that we were talking, how many people would be affected, homes that would receive notification. It was 180 or was it 280?
I think it was in that realm, correct. And that's one aspect of it is, would this include a messaging system where you could send out a text message or a message through an app or a phone app providing notice? So that's one component of it.
The other thing from the council standpoint, this is the third year that our watershed erosion grants were refused or vetoed by the governor. We as a city are going to have to do something. And I think as we get into the budgeting exercise, considering this also has Cox Creek in it, I just think it would be fantastic to be able to figure out more ways to show what it is that we're doing on a local basis to try to get some of these other grants. And I thought the guys from NOAA, and that was pretty impressive stuff, but you're right, it is. But that would be another way that maybe if we had some of it in there, we'd be eligible for some other grants a year or two now or something like that. But I would just love to see some options so that we could look at that as we put the budgets together, because I think this would be another one of the examples that we really are going to have to do something with the watershed stuff. And we've got plenty of watershed problems. This would be a great start to be able to say we can prevent some things. And at the same time, I think coordinating with the numbers and the results we have would help then those government agencies look at some other options too, that we could be a guinea pig maybe for some of their projects. So thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Loyal.
Yeah, like with any good idea, there's always costs involved. When you put your numbers together, can you try to estimate the ongoing maintaining cost, not just the initial cost, to give us an idea? And then the other question I had, and Ed kind of brought it up, was I want to make sure, is this a complement to the watershed erosion, or I would hate to see one good idea competing with another. If I live on the banks, I may say, no, I want that 200,000 for repairing my water. I don't want to compete against another good idea.
Well, that may be what we're doing, unfortunately. This didn't really come out of the watershed task force directly, frankly. Now, the USGS study proposed to include Cox Creek in it. So their price tag was high, but it also included the possibility of including Cox Creek and adding actual sensors in Cox Creek watershed as well. The other thing they recommended looking at, and this came up in the Cox Creek watershed, is detention storage. So the more we can put in detention basins, potentially we can hold back the floodwaters and prevent the water surface from rising. So that would be another component they would look at, but I think they were focused primarily on Wild Horse Creek doing that. So yeah, it's challenging because of the different concerns out there for sure.
Yes, sir, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. I agree with Councilman Marshall that this is a very good idea. I did have 3 preliminary thoughts when I was reviewing your memo. One, did I understand correctly? There is, if we follow the CSGS, that the FEMA would have some sort of benefit to the residents that are damaged by flooding? Is that the same for the private vendors?
So there is some discussion, I'm glad you read it, relative to there is a part of the National Flood Insurance Program that we do not currently subscribe to that allows communities essentially to go above and beyond with their flood management efforts. And if you join that program and you demonstrate to FEMA that you've done 1 through 10 of these additional things, you can actually reduce costs for private flood insurance. That's the community rating system. We currently are not a member. Most communities are not, but some are. It's not to say we couldn't in the future. And what they're referencing was that program, which is if we were enrolled in that program and we were able to do this, it would help our rating essentially, and then private flood insurance rates would go down. So I suppose if we did move in this direction, it might be a good thing to consider being a participant in that program.
Does that, do the private vendors also allow that same rating?
I'm not aware that they would, because it would be much less comprehensive. However, I guess I can certainly check into that.
That's something to
Yeah.
compare. The second issue was there's mention about the automatic warnings. Is this something that requires human intervention to flip a switch? Or is this something that the equipment automatically causes the warning to go out when it reaches a certain level?
Well, I think I don't know the entirety of that answer. The devices in the field would be triggered automatically based on the sensors that are installed. So if we had a gate and we wanted the gate to drop, it would be triggered automatically by the water level gauge or sensor that's in the creek. If we wanted to put flashing lights up or have a special sign, those would be automatically triggered. What I'm not so certain with is regarding a potential messaging system and how that would work, because I suspect it might require a human component, which I think is one of the big concerns we have, but we're really not very far in the weeds in that regard yet.
Understand?
Yeah.
I can add to that if you'd like, with your permission, Chair. Marshall.
Yes.
Yeah, to add to the automatic messaging notification system, that part is a little bit more tricky and legally, the city of Wildwood isn't accredited. We could get that accreditation. That said, it would require a human person to send out those notifications. Right now, the city does have the ability to send in opt-in messaging. So if someone were to go to our website and sign up for our e-newsletter. We now have access to their email. We can send out, and we've done this in the past, especially with the tornadoes that hit earlier this year and some of the severe winter weather we had. We had sent out, we call them special editions of our e-newsletter. And this tool can be used, and it's more so done for instances where we're having major traffic issues because of snow, or if there's specific damage that occurred for both the tornado storms we had this year. That tool is relatively easy to use. And the problem when you implement a messaging system that is actually, attuned to what St. Louis County Office of Emergency Management offers, then you will have to have someone on the trigger, if you will, 24/7, 7 days a week. And currently the city of Wildwood we have set 27 employees. So it would be a tough thing to fill. And the other issue with it is there are legal obligations. If, you start warning folks and then all of a sudden something does hit and someone wasn't available to send that message out in a prompt amount of time, you actually are adding on much more liability. So the approach we may want to look at, there are ways we can use the current messaging system to make sure folks are signing up and they know what would trigger a special e-newsletter. We kind of defined it that way. But yeah, it would cost potentially a whole nother body here at City Hall to be able to fulfill that messaging system. More than happy to answer any other questions. I've done a little bit of research on this now.
My third concern, thank you. My third concern was we're dealing with part of the federal government, and this part of the government is still going to be around in 4 years.
Well, I didn't mention it, but part of that proposal, the disclaimer that was provided was they aren't able to start work because they have a hiring freeze at the moment and they don't know how long it's going to be in effect. So yeah, we don't really have a good firm feel for that.
Thank you.
Gleason?
So I guess I look at our role in public safety. I mean, I like the thought of the private solution. You can send out the warnings. I meant we hear them. Not everybody looks at them. Not anybody's really thinking, oh, that's going to affect me. But I think the immediacy, as fast as the water comes up, we see it on our road where I go down there at night and I just watch it. It's coming up like this. That warning isn't going to stop somebody from driving through the water necessarily. Flashing lights at the minimum, road flooded. I mean, to me, that is, you have an immediate notification to people who are in the location where it's happening, coming up on it. That is much safer than any other electronic notification. I mean, if you're driving, are you going to look at a thing, at a text? I mean, that is, you're on the road, it came up and it comes up and it goes down so quick also. But that, that's the concern, is when you get it that fast. I don't think it's necessarily, I don't know, a case of having to get the people out of that area by predicting it. But there's a lot of things you can sign up today. I get predictions of flood warning and everything else for ours, but some of these storms are just so spot and so, narrow in focus of where they hit, that to me, that solves the safety concern of people getting washed off the road into the creek or being on the road. I think that's a great solution for that.
Certainly not like the tornadoes in the city of St. Louis where somebody didn't push the button.
I would add, my thoughts on this is that if we look at the U.S. Geological Survey, they're looking at the larger picture, potentially the entire city of Wildwood at some point in the future. I think that we need to take those kind of issues into, at least put them in the thought process about, do we want to piecemeal this with, if we move from creek to creek with private vendors, or do we want to go with a standardized process that applies across the city from an agency that's probably going to be around longer than we are? Because I would imagine, it would just be speculation on my part, that if we go ahead with Wild Horse Creek, then other watersheds are going to start asking, when's my turn, so to speak. And I do like the idea of an overarching, if we're going to tackle, instead of tackling a piece of the problem with one of the 9 watersheds, if we go with a federal level agency, we at least get the bigger picture of being considered all at one time. And so, I'm not opposed to a private vendor for cost saving, but I also like the idea of a standardized approach. And I think the other thing that we not really talked about is this benefit of a system like this is not only for the residents that live there, the people that happen to be passing through that are going to find a roadblock when it's flooded. We also have to think about our first responders that are going to be going into those messes because people aren't able to get out of them or don't know to get out of them. And, you know, swift water rescue is, in my opinion, a lot more dangerous than it looks like it's fun, you know. So, and I know that Metro West and Monarch have been involved in several swift water rescues over the years. So, I mean, I think we look at this as a whole picture. We look at it as a long-term solution for the city. And the avenue that I'm sure the city will take a look at is what is in the best interest of the city moving forward. And we'll start in one area and branch out from there. That's my thoughts on it. But I really don't want to lose sight of, you know, people can make the comment all the time, well, they should have thought about that when they lived there. But you're right. The weather patterns are changing. The erosion factors are changing. Everything is changing. I think this is a good, solid, good faith attempt by the city to get on top of it. And at the end of the day, if we can prevent, you know, one death or one swift, I would hazard to guess how much one swift water rescue costs, you know, in resources. So if we can do anything to prevent that, you have my support.
I know there's been discussions that Chief Cruz from Monarch have been a part of. I haven't been at those meetings, and I certainly don't want to speak for Monarch at all. But there have been a lot of swift water rescues in that area, and they are on the roadways, and it is generally vehicles in the water. So, you know, any measures taken, I'm sure will be vetted through the operations chiefs of multiple districts and discussed with them. But, you know, in terms of like gates by themselves, it's like maybe think twice of something like that because you're blocking response as well. So anyway, it's just my 2 cents. And like I said, I haven't been a part of the discussions. I know Les Cruz has, and I just sent a text to our operations chief. So we're certainly going to stay close to this, but appreciate the city looking into it for sure.
You're welcome.
Just a quick, and I know we're not very far into it, but the USGS doing all those things, we're still looking at if Wild Horse Creek's going to go under, you got to get out there and put a roadblock up, right? That's not doing any, it's getting notification out, but it's not doing anything to close the road. Is that correct? Or probably.
The way I, their system is it would link to devices in the field that
Okay.
would, you know, trigger warning signs as well. So they would
Okay.
have a similar, that similar impact. Yes.
I understand this is just in the infancy right now. We got a lot of information coming forward in the future.
Yeah, we have a little more work to do, as I expressed in the memo, and need to talk to the city administrator about this, but I would like to put together a request for proposal just to see if we could get more clarity on what a private vendor could provide for us and what those costs would be potentially. And then, you know, I think if we could get more clarity on that, that would probably be very helpful. And then we can certainly present that information back when we have it, but probably have to put a request for a proposal together and get that advertised so that these vendors could then formally respond and we could work through the details a little more and come up with some pricing.
Are you looking for a motion to support the effort to investigate on this?
If the board would like to do that, I would not oppose that.
Jason?
I make the motion to pursue further what solutions are available specific to the flooding situations.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a second to support the city's endeavor to explore possible floodwater notification system. To all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Can I ask who had the second?
I'm sorry.
Was Mr. Marshall?
Oh, Mr. Gleason was the original.
Who was the
Mr.
originator?
Marshall was the second. 1, 2,
Okay, thank you.
you know. They've kind of been a duo all evening, so. Let's see, next item of business is the proposed parking restrictions on Crown Point Estates.
So board members, this is a carryover from the last meeting again that was postponed to bring back to you tonight. This was a request from the HOA relative to a vehicle that was parking on street on Crown Point Estates Drive. And the question, or I guess what was proposed at the last meeting was our request to restrict the on-street parking in that first block coming off of Ridge Road, essentially from Ridge over to Crown Point Estates, the street on the east. It's Estates Court, Crown Point Estates Court. So the proposed or the recommendation that I brought to you was to restrict the parking on both sides of the road for that first block only. And it was a motion that did not move forward, and you asked for it to come back. Captain Mundell may want to interject some feedback. I believe you had a discussion or did some investigation, some further investigation, Captain.
Yes, just to get to the bottom of what occurred. You know, there's a driveway directly across from the entrance there. The resident apparently was having some work done at his house. There's really no parking along Ridge Road. So he parked on that side for a couple days. I don't think they addressed it the first time he did it. He did it within the same month. Another time, the HOA went and contacted him, and after that, he, agreed not to do it, and didn't do it any time after that. So it's a very isolated incident. I believe part of the issue here was both sides were very cordial to each other. We were not involved in this. That resident from across Ridge there sent an email kind of protesting the fact that I didn't do anything illegal and this kind of infringed on my rights. And the HOA disagreed, that they have their rules, and we're expecting that he abide by their rules, even though he doesn't live in the subdivision. So it was a agree to disagree, I think, situation. And again, after they spoke, nothing has happened since then. So very isolated situation is what's brought this forward.
So
That's what happened with that.
So best guess is to leave sleeping dog fly.
Board members, if that's what you'd like to do, we can let the sleeping dog lie for now. And if it presents itself again, we'll monitor and or bring it back to you.
Well, I guess that's what I was kind of getting at, is my concern is that if we go in there and start putting up no parking signs, that just gets everybody riled up. I think you just brought up the best point. Let's see if it happens again, and we can go from at that point.
As I just confirming, Destin, you've not had any further discussions or any further contacts? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Did we follow up with the trustee officers and let them know that that was what the situation was, that it's not something else?
I don't know if we've closed that loop, council member, but we can certainly do that.
I think one of our council members lives in that subdivision.
We do have one that lives in that subdivision. That's
So,
correct.
so maybe he would be able to help communicate that. I just think that part of that loop, closing the loop, is to go back and say, look, we've checked it out. Here's what the problem was. And then it's kind of how I think we should build that relationship with the subdivision. So just, I would let them know, instead of having them come back and call Destin and say, hey, where are we on these? I'd let them know at this point, the Board of Public Safety isn't moving forward because it appeared to be an isolated situation, and see if they have a question with it. I mean, we got to close the circle.
Well, and I don't know that there's anything wrong with entertaining a motion to table any action on this pending further developments. Make the motion.
So I'll make a motion that we table this, waiting to determine if there's additional problems And if at that time there are, then we will look at it closer.
I
Yes, sir.
guess dovetail on that, as Ed mentioned, closing that would be the city staff or be somebody just confirm that to the whoever made the initial concern or request that, hey, this is what the investigation is found. And I'll second.
Do you want to just table it until the next meeting for feedback?
Yeah, I make that
Okay,
motion.
yeah. So we have a motion proposing that we table further discussion on the parking restrictions and Crown Points until our October meeting, and the city will report back on any, give the city the opportunity to report back on any developments at that time. Do I hear a second? Vince? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We've already addressed the proposed parking restrictions on Windsor Crest. New business. We have no items listed. Under miscellaneous, I know that we promised to come back and talk about school openings and how the city's prepared. Vince?
Okay, I'll just throw out lots of things. So we are preparing, obviously, for the start of school. We do this every year. Just to familiarize you, the Wildwood Precinct has 4 school resource officers that are contracted with the Rockwood School District. 1 is at each of the middle schools. So there's 3 middle schools, and 1 is at the high school. Each of those officers is also assigned as a law enforcement liaison to an elementary school also. Last year, the Rockwood School District started a safety officer program. So they have a staff of 4 or 5 now, armed security officers. Their job is strictly to basically patrol and look at the elementary schools. So they kind of have a beat, more or less, or an area that they cover where there might be several elementary schools. Our partners at Eureka, obviously Eureka High School has an SRO from the Eureka Police Department. Chesterfield has officers assigned at their schools. Ellisville has an officer that works as a liaison with the schools there. So every school has someone. As far as our private schools, that's assigned to our neighborhood policing office. So we don't station an officer at those schools, but they have an individual, an officer that if there's an issue, we contact them or they contact us. So there's a go-to for every school. I've worked with the community college, here recently when they've opened their new building. So I've been in touch with the president over there. I believe he's the president. So we have a good rapport there. Community college has their own police department, so they have an officer or 2 that are assigned at the campus there. It's obviously a small campus with just a couple buildings. So every year, beginning of school, we get requests from parents. They're concerned about whatever, the kids walking, crossing the street, all that. So for the first week or 2, we will be have an officer at each school at the start of the day and at the end of the day, just see what issues are there. We already know one issue that we're going to be looking at. And then we'll go from there as far as, do we need to follow up with, more enforcement or placing a radar trailer or speed signs or something like that out as we go through the year. So typically when we get some concern from parents, we address it immediately, with having an officer out there for visibility, enforcement. Obviously that's important. And some of the schools have changed, their procedures. We always get, traffic concerns. So that's, part of what the SROs that are assigned at the middle schools and the high school are attentive to. The precinct will assist those school resource officers first week or 2. If there's some issue where they need an extra set of hands, we're going to do that. Obviously, I'm not going to commit our beat officers to every school every day because we just can't do that. Monday through Friday, making sure I got, multiple officers out of service at the same time. There's other stuff obviously that goes on during those times. So for the most part, the schools are self-sufficient. None of these schools are brand new. A lot of this stuff is old hat. The fact that we have two kind of significant changes coming up with Green Pines and Lafayette, we'll see how it goes. Beyond that, as far as security issues, anytime there's something major that happens, that's our opportunity to go somewhere in the country, security issue or something. That's our opportunity to make sure we make contact with the administration at the various schools, all the schools, see if they have concerns. What are their plans in place? What can we do to help them? What do they do on a daily basis? They're all very security conscious as far as locking doors and screening people coming into the buildings and that type of stuff. So I know Rockwood, was a big step for them to hire their own security staff and have their own officers that they're mobile. They can move their people around if there's some issue of concern. Every year there's, something will come out in a text message or something like that causes a stir. They are very experienced at dealing with those situations. And a lot of times we're not even aware that something has happened because they've already, drilled it down and figured out that there's really nothing to this, or there's one kid that's involved who's, out on something, suspension or something like that, and he's unhappy. And they've managed their students and their staff very well. So.
I have one other question for Captain Mondale.
Sure.
I watched your monthly report, and I knew prior to that since we last gathered, we had a highway fatality, and I believe we had a person struck, seriously injured. Did we glean anything from that?
You're right. We have had several serious accidents, kind of unusual. Each one of them's unique. The fatality is still under investigation, so I don't want to comment too much. I'm still waiting on the reconstruction report there. I was out there. There's nothing that, oh my gosh, this should have been done, or the road should have been different. It's not, and we have not had a fatality at 100 and T. I'd have to go back and look. It's been 6 years since there's even been a fatality in Wildwood. And in those two cases, they were both on Highway 100. One of them was at 100 and Pond. And that one was an intoxicated driver in the middle of the day that did something they weren't supposed to do, kind of unpredictable. And the other one involved a bicycle further west toward like Melrose, I think, where the bicyclist, made a bad move of crossing out into the traffic lane when he should not have done that. But as far as Highway T, I'd have to go back and look past that.
Making significant changes to that configuration anyhow, that help
Yes.
us prove that. The person struck at West Glen and 100.
Right.
Was that a fatality?
It was not.
Okay.
We thought it might be. He was seriously hurt. That totally inattention on part of the pedestrian. There's plenty of witnesses. He's crossing the street when the 100 traffic had a green light, and he walked right out.
Well, I know there's during
The
the
traffic.
paving, the whole lighting configurations have been, I don't think everything's where it should be right now. Maybe it's been fixed, but for a while, signals were too long, and I didn't think that had anything to do.
Comment on that, and you're right. There were issues there that I'll let Rick address that. I think we're past that now, right? The intersection at 100 in West Glen, 100
Right,
in
yeah.
Manchester.
Well, as part of the improvements, we replaced the traffic signals at Pierside and 100. And one of the main issues has been an ongoing issue is the coordination with MoDOT signal. And we had struggled with that, and actually the construction didn't help, frankly, but it is, I mean, I say that, what I'm implying is during construction, we still struggle with that aspect. With the project and with the upgrade of the signal, we have the new GPS linked time clocks in both the MoDOT's signal controller and our cabinet. So they should be much closer in sync, and I think that's happening. I've been trying to watch it. Now, the issue we can still have is when Metro West sends their vehicles through there, which is more than I realize. I think it does mess up the timing plan for 100. And so then it takes a while for MoDOT's signal to get back into this plan. And so there's a period of time where it could be out of step after that occurs. So that is one issue. And I think I did see that the other day. But every time I've been going through there, it seems like it's been reasonably in coordination. But if you don't believe that to be the case, let me know.
And I don't hesitate to call Rick
Yeah.
on my way home when I go through there and traffic.
The last thing I had, and I asked you to bring it up the last meeting for this meeting, was the status of the pedestrian crosswalk at Old Fairway and 100
Well,
or Manchester.
we are still working on it, unfortunately, and I think my takeaway on these flashing beacons, these crosswalks, is the more we've gotten into it, and Destin is going to be an expert here if he isn't already in the operation and maintenance of them, is that they're 10 years old, and we probably need to plan for a life expectancy of probably 10 years. And because what we're hearing is that likely we need to, well, we have been replacing the batteries. Now we're having communication issues between the push buttons. And it may be just a matter of that we just should plan in 10 years' time to swap out all the hardware with new hardware, because the technology does improve, for one thing. But I think the older it gets, it seems like it's obviously, I mean, typical of any device, it's going to be more prone to failure. So I think that's my biggest takeaway. You know, we've tried to lean on electrical contractors to help us, and we've struggled because the troubleshooting is difficult and it's time intensive. And I think that's the other aspect, is they just don't have the time to put into troubleshooting such a small location. So I think we figured out our troubleshooting expert is going to be sitting next to me. And, but I think we can also train T Hill Construction, who's our main right-of-way contractor. If we can train them in the troubleshooting as well, it'll go a long ways, because we have previously tried to resort with a larger electrical contractor to do it, and it just hasn't been very responsive, and it's just not working. So the goal going forward is, one, look to replace those devices probably in a more reasonable time frame of 10 years. And then secondly, we're going to probably troubleshoot it ourselves. Dustin's been on the phone and emailing the supplier and trying to get information relative to the communications and why they're not communicating. And we'll just replace the solar panels, we'll replace the batteries, we'll replace at least the push buttons, and hopefully it'll have a little more reliability. So
it is our goal to try and fix it.
absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
I think there's still a viable solution. I don't know that we should shy away from it. We've had good, honestly, I feel like we've had pretty good luck with them up until this last period of time. But it has been a challenge for us.
Could you update us at next meeting?
I can certainly do my best, yes.
Earlier comments you asked the general, yes, sir, Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Bader, I was just curious if we circle back to the approval of minutes. Were the minutes approved without any corrections?
No. Did you ask if they were approved?
Were they approved without any corrections?
No, these minutes are going to come back to us on the next meeting because there were some inconsistencies.
There were a couple that I wanted to point out. I don't know if they were already pointed out. It showed me as being an absent board member. And although the mayor may have submitted my nomination to the council, I was not an active member at that point.
I knew that.
And I think it also may show that Board member Vanek was not listed as being present or absent, but he did make a motion under approval of minutes. So I'm assuming he was here or participated in some way.
Check on that.
Think those-
Thank you.
Just one more question for Mr. Brown. In those crosswalks, is there any kind of a meter in there to know how many times it's actually used? Because some of those locations are going to get a lot more traffic, like the one out here coming down on Taylor. That one's pretty active versus some of the others where I just wonder if there's a meter that can tell us that's just not been used more than a couple hundred times, where the other ones maybe 1,000 times. Is that anything that's built into those?
Well, unless Justin can tell me otherwise, I don't believe they have that capability to record like actuations of the push button or something like that. I'm not aware of that.
Just curious. It's just an activator. And I was thinking,
yeah.
thanks.
Earlier, we were talking about school openings and taking a look at the signage along schools, oil at, we look at private. That, and I know there's a whole other set of them there. Sorry. Do we, when we look at the standardization or the signage along our public schools, are we looking at private schools at all, or is that beyond the city's scope of involvement?
It wasn't on my radar, quite frankly, with this initial review. But once we get through this, we could certainly step back and consider that to the degree that it would be applicable. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any other items for miscellaneous tonight? Yes, sir.
Board members, I want to apologize that I think we've been messing up with the hard copies and what the desire is with you all in terms of meetings. So if you don't mind, I think I'd like to hear what your preference is. If you really would like hard copies of the agenda plus the items, we can do that. We've kind of tried to get away from that, at least on admin public works. If we get away from it, you do have to, it does put it on you all to have a device that you might want to bring in. Because that's usually what people do, is have a laptop or a tablet. But so I just like to know what you prefer, and we'll do our best.
Well, I'll just speak for myself. I bring my tablet and do it from there as well. I'll take a snapshot of it before the meeting and put my notes on. So I like to review it, put my notes on it before the meeting. So I don't need a paper copy.
And normally the only thing I ever print up is the pre-existing meeting minutes, the ones we're going to approve, and the agenda for this meeting. That's the only thing I ever print up. The rest of it, I either rely on the presentations or bring a device to look at it.
Well, I'm happy to do it. I just want to make sure we're clear. That's all.
Not gonna do it and bring my device. Matt, we're gonna get in on the public's internet, or are we gonna have access to the internet?
There should be an open Wi-Fi available right now. Yeah.
Do we have the
It isn't. Get volumes of documents.
Do we have the capability of pulling them up on these monitors during the meeting, like when you're making your presentation?
We do. I think it's just as long as Destin has that as a goal, there's no reason why you couldn't do that. And I think when we get more into a routine, we can make a point of bringing that up on the screen.
I myself don't mind bringing another device. It's not a big deal. We've heard from this side of the table. You guys?
Yeah, I'm way too old for that. I print mine out, and my city iPad, I can hardly, especially if it's a document, I can't even get it positioned on there. So when it comes to the streets or the layouts of how wide the street is where those are, to me, it just doesn't work for me on the iPad. And so I think printing them out is so much easier. Again, if we knew we were going to be able to get to it, but we've had all kinds of challenges in being able to look at it. But unfortunately, when you wait to see it when you get here, then you really don't have a chance. I usually go and drive and look at the thing too. So I personally think, especially if it's something where you're looking for some input on intersections or that type of stuff, having a hard copy would be a real advantage. And I know we're all trying to go to being paperless, but I can't seem to see it as well on my iPad. So,
We make it a goal to have the information by, say, right now, we get it on Tuesday and Wednesday in the meeting.
yeah.
You know, I know the council meetings or the week before, if you say Monday of the week, sometimes we don't even know if we're having a meeting. I kind of waiting to see what the email's gonna say late on Tuesday afternoon.
Meetings are on the calendar for the city and I'm trying to add them to the agenda. So the next meeting date, and we can make sure we state that here. We will try to see if we can do it on Mondays. Mondays can be a little bit challenging at times. But we can see if we can get that on Mondays to you.
So if I gathered this correctly, unless we ask you to print them up, you're going to expect us to bring our own device. I think I like
I've
that.
got to hear that at least two people would like hard copies, which
Yeah.
if that's what we
Yeah.
need to do, we will do that. I can make
Yeah.
2 copies. I can make 3 copies.
I'm as old school as Councilman Marshall, but I have a printer at home, so I'll make my own copies.
Make at least 2. How's that? Does that work?
I'm fine printing mine off at home too. I just think it's really hard to think that you're going to make a decision seeing something on the screen. And then we're sitting there saying, okay, every 2 months we'll come in. It may or may not have that visually. And I know that that's just a freaky thing, but unfortunately, pretty much have to have a meeting with it without the technology. So.
Any other discussion? Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Our next meeting date, by the way, in case you haven't heard, is October 9th. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. This meeting is adjourned at 8:31 PM.